Okay, so I wanted to put up a review here, going over the last quiz. Talk about how to properly use a microscope. And so these are the same questions, similar questions, what you might see on the test, but I could ask for other things about handling the microscope, maybe things that you guys saw on the Kahoot review about like handling the microscope. But anyway, going through these questions, number one, of course, relationship between the image as it appears under the microscope compared with how you would just look at it using your eyes. You should have saw that the relationship would be A, it's upside down and backward. Now, if we're going to talk about the steps, I put number one, step one, first thing you do, place specimen on the stage. I'm sorry, number two, I skipped. We've got a 10 times magnification for the eyepiece. We have a 4 times magnification for the lens. If we're finding total magnification, we just multiply those two together, and that would be 40 times. All right, now the steps. So number one is we're going to place a specimen on the stage. What do we do next? Well, the first thing we do after putting the specimen on the stage, we're going to look at the course, use a course adjustment. Now with the course adjustment, I'm sorry, that's wrong. We're going to start by using the low power objective. And with the low power objective, we are going to use the course adjustment. That's the only time we use the course adjustment is with the low power objective. Now when we use the course adjustment, we are next going to switch to the medium power objective. Now that we're on the medium power objective, in order to focus in, we are going to use the fine adjustment. So that would be the fifth step. And that's the first time we use the fine adjustment. After we get that focused, now we can go to the highest power objective, and then to focus that in, we're going to use the fine adjustment for the second time, which is the seventh step out of these. Okay, so moving on. Basic functions of living things. So we did, our style was Mrs. Gren. N would be nutrition. Got to be able to get nutrients. We have to get rid of waste, which is excretion. Living things need to reproduce. They also grow. And these are in the explanations. Make sure you put the explanations. I'm just trying to be quick. Sensitivity, so sensitivity to the external and internal environments. Respiration and metabolism. And the first one, movement, and that's external and internal as well. Okay, so make sure we include the explanations with those. All right, so moving on to LT12 about anatomy and physiology. So we have some examples put down here. Anytime it's not moving, not living, just sitting there and we're studying it, that's going to be anatomy. So in this case, like dissection would be anatomy. Just looking at the organ size or weight would be anatomy. But when we're looking at actual tests, things taking place in real time, studied living subjects that are moving and doing things, that would be physiology. And observing a heart in action, same thing, in action. Continuing on, so levels of organization, we have chemical, which would be atoms and molecules. That's going to be our smallest one. This is not yet living things, atoms and molecules. But these atoms and molecules, or molecules, can combine to make larger things that have specific life-giving functions, which are called organelles. And so organelles will lead us to this next step, and this is actually the first step of living things. That was a question I had on previous quizzes. And cells will make up tissues, and tissues will make up organs, and then organs working together will make up organ systems. In terms of the body systems and labeling their major components, in the next part, Really, this is just kind of, we did some review of different body systems through the Kahoot review. These ones obviously would be skeletal is the first one. It has skull and vertebrae there. Heart and blood vessels, that means I'm dealing with circulatory or cardiovascular. Lungs and trachea mean I'm dealing with respiratory. Then if I'm going to label them, of course, the skull up here. This is 1,4B. The vertebrae, or I could have even labeled up there, either one. Heart, there's the heart. And blood vessels. And the last one we have the lung. And we have the trachea, which is the windpipe. Not the food tube. It's air tube. Okay. So next thing we have here is homeostasis. So I can explain the concept of homeostasis, and what I was looking for here is homeostasis itself. It's not regulating homeostasis. It's actual homeostasis itself. And that's a relatively stable internal environment. So we have certain conditions in our body, inside our body, and we want to keep them within a certain range. That's homeostasis. The process of keeping them in that range is homeostatic regulation. And that's actually going to go along with learning target 1.6. So in 1.6, I just gave you some examples. I've been using the same ones all along, but negative feedback or positive feedback. The most common type of feedback cycle in the body is going to be negative. Thermoregulation, regulating body temperature, is another example of that. Osmoregulation, blood water concentration, another example. Contractions during childbirth and blood clotting are actually positive feedback, where this stimulus, whatever's happening, the body actually works to enhance that stimulus and drive it even further away from normal. That's positive feedback. A lot less common in the body. All right, and then we had to label the regions and whatnot. So I kind of work from the letters back. So the I would be, A was ocular, and the head would be cephalic, and the mouth would be oral. And the back of the lower leg, so that's the calf, that's going to be sural. The nose is going to be nasal, of course, so that's E. And the bottom of the foot would be plantar. And G, ear would be otic. H, the belly would be abdominal. The kneecap would be patellar. Neck is cervical. Where the thigh meets the trunk, K is inguinal. Ankle, L, tarsal. Chest would be thoracic. Forearm, N, would be antebrachial. And upper arm, O, that would be regular brachial. And heel would be calcaneal. And the buttocks would be Q, that's gluteal. Wrist would be carpal, and thigh would be femoral. So those are the landmarks. All right, so match the following directional terms with the diagrams. Be sure to look at the diagram on the next page also. And I need that second diagram for the first two, deep and superficial. If I'm looking at this picture of the skin here, deeper down away from the surface would be deep, and closer to the surface would be superficial. So that means that I would actually be superficial and J would be deep. So J is deep, I is superficial. All right, I should have scrolled it down more. All right, lateral means to the side, so that's going to be G. And medial means towards the middle, so that's going to be F. Inferior at the bottom, that's going to be D. Superior at the top, that's going to be A. Proximal and distal are used only for limbs, proximal being closer to the point of attachment, distal being farther away. So proximal would be E and distal would be H. The posterior dorsal, that's the back side, so in this diagram it's going to be B, and anterior ventral is going to be C. So those are directional terms. Okay. And then planes, sectional planes. So if I'm dividing the specimen into top and bottom portions, that means I have a transverse or a cross section. If it divides the specimen into front and back portions, now we're going to be talking frontal. Divides the specimen into left and right portions, that's going to be sagittal. I don't think I've changed that since the first quiz, but do not expect it to be in the same order on your test, along with some other questions, like the questions I gave on Kahoot about what planes would go through certain objects. So think about it, what kind of plane would, or maybe you think about what plane would not go through those two objects. All right, and then with body cavities, so we have pelvic is the lower one, the lowest one, that's going to be H. We have cranial, which is B. We have thoracic in the chest, that's E. We have spinal, I think this is another one I didn't change at all either. That's going to be C. We have dorsal, which is a combination of the cranial and spinal, so that's going to be A. We have abdominopelvic, which is a combination of the abdominal and the pelvic, so that's going to be F. We have the ventral, which is all of those, that's going to be D. And we have the abdominal cavity itself is going to be G. Again, on the Kahoot review, I forgot to put the body cavities on there, so don't just look at those or practice those and think that body cavity is not going to be on there anymore. All right, and then for the medical imaging, I put X-ray as radiography. Using multiple X-rays, using the different layers to kind of get a 3D concept going, that's going to be the CT scan. Also uses X-rays. Pregnant women looking at babies, that's going to be ultrasound. Type of nuclear procedure. There's nuclear decay that's picked up. That's going to be a positive emission tomography. And then E is going to be MRI for seeing the brain clearly. Works well. And so that's pretty much it. All the stuff that we covered. And good luck.